everybody. I'm delighted to see so many people here. This is one of my favorite spots. I guess I've been interested in this cemetery for at least 50 years and have been on one or another committee through these years to restore it. It has been in pretty terrible shape until a few years ago. Always interested in cemeteries, I decided to write a book, and it took about a year and a half or 2 years of research in the libraries and in the records of Christ Church and at the University of Kentucky particularly to find lists of all the known people who are buried here. And at one time there were upwards of 700 supposedly buried here. There are now 400. And in 1814, when Christ Church had the third building, it was decided that some of the graves that were there should be moved, but they really didn't have any place to move them. So when this cemetery was deeded to Christ Church in 1832, many of those people who'd been buried in and around the church were moved to the old Episcopal burying ground. The biggest influx of corpses was between 1833 and 1849, the cholera epidemics. When Christ Church received this cemetery in 1832, it was just 6 months before the terrible cholera scourge of 1833, when 1/3 of the congregation of Christ Church died. The first bishop of Lexington, who was also the 4th rector of Christ Church, buried his own wife, who died in his arms, leaving 4 babies. He's well known because James Lane Allen wrote about Bishop Benjamin Bosworth Smith following in a funeral cortege, dressed in his vestments, following the casket of his wife up here. The cholera epidemic really put this cemetery on the map. And of course you've all heard of King Solomon of Kentucky. Well, King Solomon was the vagrant who was sold on Cheapside as a vagrant and who was bid on by an old colored lady named Charlotte, who sold pies on Cheapside. Well, she bought him for, somebody said $13, but I think it was $17 because some Transylvania medical students made her go a little bit higher because they wanted King Solomon for his body. But anyway, he dug grave after grave in cemeteries all over Lexington, often sleeping in the grave. King Solomon was in an unmarked grave for 40 years. And finally, 40 years later, he was buried at the Lexington Cemetery. And his tombstone is marked, "He had a noble heart." And indeed he did. The people that are buried in this, as Dixon pointed out to you, this cemetery is known as Lexington's Westminster Abbey because of the prominence of the people who were buried here. John Grimes, a famous artist and a protege of Matthew Jewett, is buried right over there. Colonel George Nicholas, who wrote Kentucky's first Constitution in 1792 and was a Revolutionary War soldier, his plaque is out front, and he's buried over there. Colonel Thomas Hart is buried right over there, and all of his family. This lot was divided into 12 plots, and Henry Clay owned one. The Clay family was later moved, the people that were there, and many, many prominent people owned it. In this book, I have got that as the A because the lot holders are known because of a deed at the cemetery, at the courthouse, plus many other places. But I think that the importance of this cemetery now, of course, is because of the people that are buried here. And it's fascinating to read about them. There's a long list and about 400 in here. I'm not supposed to talk too long, and I can tell you story after story about this cemetery. Just on the television a minute ago, they asked me if there were any ghosts. And I said, well, not that I really know about, but people think that there were. So, I don't know. But I just want to tell you, she asked me why I thought this cemetery was important. I think it's important principally because a church, after much hassle and a lot of neglected years, finally decided that it was worth saving. And I'm so delighted to hear about this Fayette County Trust for Preservation of Rural Cemeteries, which is why I'm here today. Because Lisa called and asked me to come and talk, and asked Jim Birchfield and Terry Foodie and other people to talk. So I'm going to shut up and let them talk. I do want to say this book is on sale if anybody wants a book ever at Christchurch Bookstore. It can be sold, and it's fascinating. And without the help of the late Carol Pettit and James Birchfield, this book would never have been published. They have stories in it, and it's a wonderful book, their part. I thank you very much for letting me talk to you, and it's good to be here.